use for their work. And what's really great about it is that you can use it for Mac OS and also Windows, and you can also actually access it from your browser. So the reason why Figma is actually my favorite design tool is that it's very versatile. So you're not limited to just using it for web design work. You can actually use it for graphic design, illustration work, collaboration, and brainstorming sessions. So I think that's also why it has become such an industry standard in UX UI design. And then, like I said kanina, Figma is very accessible also. So, you know, this is something that is very good, especially if someone's not a Mac user or if you're someone who works with clients a lot. And in line with that, Rin, it's a very collaborative tool. I like calling Figma Google Docs for design because you can design with your team in real time, and that's what's so great about it and what made it stand out compared to Sketch before. And because of its comment functionality, it's also great for getting feedback from your clients and also for dev handoff because of its inspect functionality. So there, that's why Figma is a very good design tool. Okay, so for today's topics, what we'll do first is talk about the Figma basics. So we'll be talking about the different parts of the interface, like the design tab, prototype tab, functionalities such as auto layout, layers, and for this part, Rin, I suggest that you try to follow along. You can open Figma in your browser so that you can also get a sense of how it works, and so you get familiar with it, Rin. Okay, and then after we get to know all the basics, we'll be making our own design system. So we'll be setting our typography styles, color styles, and we'll be creating components to see how exactly can you apply Figma. And from therein, we'll be making a mockup. And after that, since we'll be discussing prototyping, we'll be prototyping that mockup as well. And I'll be introducing you guys to the basic interactions and animations that you can do with Figma, since it's also possible to create dynamic mockups, prototypes with Figma, since you want to show interactions when it comes to UX UI design. Okay, so let's begin with the basics. Okay, so when you first open Figma, when you have an account, this is what you'll see. So this is what is called the file browser, and um, actually here, this is where you can access all your files. So it will show you your recently visited files, so it doesn't have to be, you don't have to be the owner for it. And then it also has your drafts here. And then below it, as you can see, you can also access the Figma community from the file browser. And after that, this is where you can access your Figma team if you're part of one. And then this is also where you can create your own Figma design file and something that they just came out with, the FigJam file, which you can use for collaborating and brainstorming with your team. And then you can also import files and look at the templates that they have. So they came out with parang blank presets, design systems, presentation templates, and anything you can think of. And you can also actually look for more in the community. Okay, so going back, yun, this is a summary of what you can see upon first opening Figma. Okay, so once you actually go inside a file, what you see is this, where I'm in actually. So this is called the Figma file or the Figma editor. And here we can divide this editor into four parts. So the first part is the layers panel. So it's this panel on the left, and this is where you can access your layers, your assets, and your pages. And then here in the middle, it's called the canvas, and this is where you will be doing all your design work, where all your designs will be basically. And then here naman on the top part of the interface, this is what we call the toolbar. So here's where you can access all the tools. And then in the middle part, this is where you access the contextual tools. It's called that because it changes depending on what element you're selecting. And then here you can also access things like how to share your file, presentation mode, and viewing modes. And then here naman on the right hand side of Figma, this is called the properties panel, and inside it there are three tabs. So there's the design tab, the prototype tab, and the inspect tab. So there, we'll be going through all of these after, and we'll be trying out the different tools that they have. Okay, so first we can discuss the layers panel since it's one of the simpler ones. So here, like I said earlier, this is where you can access your layers, your assets, which you can see is where you will be able to access your components later on. And then you can also create multiple pages in Figma, and there you can have that too. And if you can look at the the text here inside the layers panel, you can see that they have different symbols on the left of the text. So these correspond to the different types of objects that you can um, use in Figma. So there are frames, which is basically this one. So if you're familiar with yung mga Adobe Suite platforms, they have art boards, and this is like the equivalent of it. And then you also have groups. So like um, this is when you have multiple elements grouped together, and then components and instances, which we'll be talking about later. And you can also access them inside the assets tab. And then there's also the usual design tools such as text, shape, image, and GIFs. So there, that's what you will be seeing in the layers panel. Okay, so for the next part, which is the canvas, this is very basic. So basically for the canvas, you can access the background color here. So this is the default color, but you can also change it up depending on what you need for your canvas. So there's that. And then there are also different view options. So like you can see here in the picture, there's this outline mode. So you can see it here. This is for if you want to have more what's this? If you want to be more detailed with your design work. And then you can also access the pixel grid. So if you zoom in, you'll see that the canvas turns and you can see the pixels on it. So this is also great for if you're being very detailed with your work and making sure that things align up the way they should, and that there's the spacing is perfect and things like that. And then there's also the layout grid. So here you can turn the layout grids with off and on. There, that's how it should look like. But if you turn it off, it will just disappear. Okay. Okay. So that's the canvas. And then, so on to the more exciting part. So the toolbar, we'll be going through each one of them. So the first one here is the drop down. And this is, you can access a lot of things here. Some of them, they just repeat from the other tools. But some notable things are like these ones for the canvas options. You can also show and hide the UI or multiplayer cursors if you're collaborating with other people. And then what I also like is that you can access plugins here. So there's that, and also integrations and the preferences also. So this is where you can toggle if you want your elements to snap to the pixel grid objects, things like that. And this is also where you can access your nudge amount. So how many pixels will your elements adjust and so on. Okay, so that's the drop down. And then the selection tool is pretty straightforward. So by default you're usually there. So it just makes you select elements. But if you also open it, there's the scale tool, and what it does is it just scales your objects, and it does it automatically for you without, if you're selecting, if you're scaling a typography object, it adjusts the font for you, as you can see here also. So it's very handy, and it will also actually be mentioned in the tips later. Okay. And then after that, we have the frame and slice tools. So um, when you're making your first design, having a frame is very important. So when you select on this, you can see that they have presets for depending on what device you're designing for or what you need if you're trying to do anything for graphics. So um, usually for web design, we go for this size, yung desktop, and then you can also there are also a lot of presets for your phone and tablet sizes. So there, once you click on it, it just appears there, and then yeah, so that's the frame. And actually, as you can see, you can select it, and then you can also change the fill from there, and you can also change the border radius of it. You can add effects to it if you want there. So there, that's how the frame works. And then the tool under it is called the slice, but I personally don't use this that much. But for reference, how it works is you can select a part of your work, and then what you can do is you can export it. Okay, hmm, export it, and then it should come up here. And what it exports is what's inside the selection only. So there. Um, yeah, so that's how the slice tool works. Okay. And then after that, we have the shape tools. So as you can see, there are lots of different shapes that we can play around with in Figma. So there's rectangle, line, arrow, ellipse, polygon, and star. And these are the different shapes you can make in Figma. So for example, here you have a rectangle. You can rotate it when you hover on it. Here, this arrow appears, and you can move it around like that. And if you can see also, these circles appear, and this indicates the border radius. So you can just move it around like that. And then you can also double click on these shapes. And this is what happens. So here you can create a new shape. You can remove anchor points. You can connect them to make something else. And yeah, that's basically how these shape tools work. So same rin for like ellipse, and then for yung polygon naman, because for this one there's another um functionality that appears, and that's the sides of it. So you can move it up to increase the number of sides or down to decrease it. Then same with the rectangle, you can adjust the border radius. And then it's the same thing with the star. So you can also adjust it in that way, can change the ratio of the shape. And yeah, it's very flexible, and that's why a lot of people use it in for graphic design work. And then for the lines and arrows naman, so you can make a line. You can hold shift to make sure that it goes straight. So it goes at angles like that if you hold shift, but if you don't want to, you can just do that. And then here, this is where you can adjust lines in the under stroke inside the design tab. So you can make the line thicker, thinner. And then if you open this drop down rin, you can access yung advanced stroke settings. So you can change how the cap looks like, if you want it more rounded, more square, if you want it have an arrow like that. And then you can also change it to have dashes. So wait, there, the higher the number, the more dashes you will see there. Yeah, and then the line arrow functions in a similar way, except that it has an arrow there. And if you make the stroke bigger, that's when the arrowhead becomes larger as well. And then same thing, you can also create dashes for this part of the arrow. Okay. And then you can also access yung place image here. So okay, there, and then you can just put any image. Okay, I don't have any photos, but yeah, this is what's under the shape tools. Okay. And then beside it naman, it's the pen and pencil tool. So this is if you want to create any vector objects in your canvas. So you can make your shapes this way too. It's just more flexible than, just having one of the shapes here. So can have this is how you can make blobs or any other more complex shapes. A lot of people use the pen tool to make their own icons, so it's also helpful in that way. And then for the pen tool, I mean the pencil tool, you just basically freehand it and it kind of smoothens it out for you. And then same with the line tool, since it's made out of a stroke, you can also thicken the stroke so that it looks like that. Okay, so there, that's the pen and pencil tool. And then next naman is the text tool. So this is pretty self-explanatory. You can click and then drag to just start a text box, and then you can just type anything. And there, that's the text tool. The hand tool, you can just use it to move around in your canvas. And then the comment tool, which is very helpful when you work with clients or if you need to get feedback from your team. They can use this and they can just leave their own comments here. So there, you can also leave emojis and you can also tag your teammates here. And then as you can see, it just appears here as a comment. And if you resolve this comment, you can also just click that and it gets resolved. Okay, so I mentioned that this center portion is where the contextual tools live. And since I'm not selecting anything right now, it just shows that this file is under my drafts, and the title. So you can, oh, okay, you can rename it. You can access things like the version history, or you can duplicate the file here, delete it, you can move it there. But if you select something like a shape, you see that it changes and these tools appear. So the first one is it just lets you edit the object. So it's the same thing as if you double click it, and then there these things appear. And then you can also find that you can create a component using this part here. So we'll be talking more about that later. And then the next one that you can see is layer masking. So how that works is, for example, you have a photo, but the dimensions aren't, you can't just simply copy and paste it, right? What if you want to have the focal point here around that sandwich? So if you simply just place the image, you can't really control which part of the photo it focuses on. So some people, what they do is they mask it. So you select, oh wait, okay, so the image should be on top. You select both of them, and then you use the layer mask, and then you can just change it around. You can make the photo bigger, and that's how you can use the layer mask. So there. Um, okay. And then some other things that are not appearing there right now is, for example, you can, if you select two objects, this button appears. So it's called Union Selection. And if you're also familiar with Adobe Illustrator, it has something like this because we're working with vector graphics. So as you can see, I have two shapes here, so two ellipses, and I want to make a moon shape, for example, because that's not something that's accessible here in the shape tool. So what I can do is select those two, and I can select the appropriate function. So here, so that would be subtract selection, and it's a moon shape, but you can also, even if you've done that, you can still edit it in the way that you want. Or, for example, maybe you want to do a full union selection, so it creates an entirely different shape like that. Okay, okay. And then what else? You can also create links now. So, for example, you can select a text, and then this button appears. So create link, and then you can just um, assign a link to it. So when you hover over it, it appears, and then you can just open the link from there. So makes it very easy. Okay, and then so moving on from this part to the right side of the toolbar, this is where you can see your editors here. And this is also where you can share your files, so can specify the viewing editing options. And then this is also where you can present it. This is mostly what it's very helpful for when you have to present it as a prototype. So when you click on it, it just goes here and enters presentation mode. Okay. And then beside it naman, it's also the zoom and view options. So it's similar rin to what is found here. So there, that's the toolbar. Okay. So moving on to the properties panel, which is this part. We'll first be covering the design tab. So this is how it looks like. Depending rin on what you select, this this part changes. So when you haven't selected anything, the default is that it's for the background. As you saw kanina, you can also hide it so that there's no background. But then if you select something like the image here, you see that different tools appear um, so that you can edit it. So the first one here, this is where you can find the alignment and distribution tools. So this is all in relation to the frame that the object is in. So for example, I want it to be aligned left, it will immediately align there, center, or to the right of the frame. And then there's also the top, center, and also bottom. And then the distribution tools, this is um, when you've selected two elements. So as you can see, it's now activated, unlike if I just have one. So when you select that, you can um, distribute the spacing, although since it's already distributed, it didn't do anything there. Okay. And then this is also where you can see the frame size and orientation. So there, this is the width and the height. And then you can scrub here to change it. And same thing with the width. These are things that you can change. And the orientation naman, it's the X and Y axis. So same thing, you can scrub it to change the position like that. And then you can also see different options like the rotation. So you can rotate this, and it's not only limited to the frame. You can also do it with other objects like text or images. And then depending rin on what you have selected. So if I've selected this object, which I can change the border radius, you can also change that here. And same thing, you can also just scrub it like that. Okay. Um, so below that, you can see that there are constraints, but this one I'll be discussing later on, along with instances and layout grid and auto layout, since these are a bit more complicated. Okay, so we'll be covering the simpler ones first. So that's from layer to export settings. Okay, so for layer naman, here, if you've used Photoshop or Illustrator, this should look very familiar. So um, you can try it out here. For example, I've selected that. I can change the layer of it, and depending on what I select, it changes how these two elements interact with each other, or how it will interact with the background. So there are lots of different options that you can play around with here. Okay. And then text, it's also very self-explanatory. So this is where you can access your text styles, which we'll be talking about later. And then this is where you change the typography, the weight of it, the font size, the line height, letter spacing, paragraph spacing. So same thing with it has the scrubbing functionality as well. So you can change it that way. And then this naman, this is if you want to toggle between auto height, auto width, and fixed size. So for example, my my text object looks like this. I can change it to auto height and it automatically changes it to me. Changes it like that. Same thing with this. If I wanted to have an automatic width, I can just click on that and it automatically changes the width for you. And then this is if you want to do it manually. For the fill For the fill functionality, this is where you can access color styles. And as you can see, this is where you change the color. So here it also shows you your recent document colors here. And you can just change it however you want. And then you can also toggle the visibility on or off if you want. And then this is also how you remove the fill. So I'll add that back in. And same with the strokes, so you can add a stroke here or remove it, and also toggle the visibility on and off. And as you saw kanina with the line um, tool, you can change the width of the stroke, and you can also change the color of the stroke. So that's how it looks like. You can also change how the stroke grows. So if you want it to grow from the inside, from the center, and from the outside, you can see that it changes its position depending on what you select. And here, as I mentioned earlier, you can find advanced stroke settings there. And below that is where you can find selection colors. So for example, you have your frame selected, it will show you all the colors being used um, in this frame. And what I like about it is that you can change anything that uses this color from here. So you can see that it changes everything, and you don't have to manually select all of these objects just to change it. You just have to select the frame and then change it from the selection colors. Um, and if you have color styles, this is also where you can change it. But since we don't have it, we can't. And then also, if you want to select all the items using this functionality, you can just click on this one and it will select everything that uses this hex code for you. Okay. And then aside from that, Rin, you can also access effects from here. So you can also have effect styles. Same thing, you can toggle visibility on and off. And then, yeah, the default effect is the drop shadow, but you can also have access to inner shadow, layer blur, background blur. So we can cover drop shadow first. So here you can change how it looks like, so how it will behave. the position, how blurred the shadow will be, like that, and also how much it will spread. So you can control that more now. You can also change the shadow color. So there. And you can also change the opacity depending on what you want. For inner shadow, it works very similarly, except the shadow is inside the object. And then layer blur, it essentially just blurs the layer and you can just scrub it to toggle by how much you want it to be blurred. Okay, background blur. Well, it doesn't work here because there's no backup. But um, so those are the effects. And then last but not least, you can also access the export settings. So this is when you need to export any frames that you need or any elements that you need for your design. So you can change um, the file type, PNG, JPEG, SVG, or PDF. And you can also select if you want to export the contents only, so these assets, or if you want the whole frame. And then you can also have a preview of it here. So there, those are the properties that you can find in the design panel. Okay, but moving on, since we didn't get to cover some of them, so here we'll be discussing the layout grid. And what's important about using the layout grid for designers is that we need our designs to be very precise. So that's why we need to use the layout grid. And it also depends what device you're designing for. So the layout grid also um, changes with that. So as you can see, this is the default grid that appears. So it's just a regular grid, but a lot of designers we use yung columns. So here, this is where you can change the number of columns. So you can have just one or however many you want. You can also type it in manually, and then you can also change the color of your columns and the opacity of it. And then you can also dictate how you want your column grid to behave. So do you want it to be stretched, centered, right, left? So you can also dictate it there. But I would recommend using the stretch one. And from there, you also dictate your margins. So usually we go for 120. And the gutter, which is the part in between these columns. So that will be very important when you have um, layouts for like a blog or a list. So there, you can also change the gutter size. So that's how the layout grid works. And you can also layer these layout grids too. So some people, they also like to layer it with a row grid. So there, but a lot of the times people just stick with the column grid. So that's how the layout grid works. And usually this is the first thing that one of the first things that you do when you start creating a mockup for your website or app. Okay, so for auto layout naman, um, also feel free to follow along so you can get a sense of how Figma works. Okay, so for auto layout, basically, um, it lets your elements become more dynamic. So instead, for example, we have a button here. Um, here, okay, we have a button there. If you wanted to add more text to it, it you have to manually adjust it, and then you have to you have to do it manually. So that's something that we don't want. What we'd want instead is for it to be dynamic. So it makes designing much easier for us. So for example, um, we want to retain this spacing for our button. We can select these two components, these two elements, and then click on auto layout. And as you can see, it changes to a different icon. So if I want to change the text, it automatically changes the size for me. So it's very easy. And if you want to um, change how it works also, you can do it here. So you can change the spacing in between the text and the button. So if I wanted it to be before, you can change it like that. So there. And yeah, that's how auto layout works. So we can so since we've tried it with the button, let's try it out with several elements. So we'll be trying to replicate this design. So first we can create the name of the plan, and then can dictate the price as well. So we can change it to make it bigger. And if you want to if you don't want to do it manually, you can just use the alignment tools here. And then we'll have the subtitle. Oh no, that. And then we'll copy the button here. So a download button. And then the text. Oh, so there. We have the elements, but the spacing isn't very refined yet. So what we want to do is we work from the top to the bottom, but it also depends on what layout you're trying to do. Okay, so first you select the first two elements, you click auto layout, and you can see that the space between them is 19. So maybe I want it to be 24. And then once you have that frame, you move on to the next element. You add an auto layout, and here you can also just the same, just change up the layout so that it's following the 8-point grid, and you just work your way downwards here or, or 32 until we have this. So as you can see, maybe if you want to change the width of this element, you can just, and if there are any elements below it, it will automatically change. So for example, this element, if I make it smaller, the elements below it adjust accordingly. So it's very easy to do. So there, that's how the auto layout works. Okay, so moving on to constraints. So basically, constraints it's also related to responsiveness. Making sure that we don't do everything manually. So it how it works is you kind of dictate how you want an element to behave based on how we kind of adjust it. So this one already has constraints applied, but let's try to do it from scratch. Okay, so first we make a frame because these only work when you're in a frame. It's 96 pixels. We can add an effect to it. Wait, there. Hmm, 40. Okay, and then we can add company name. Just there. Then we can add the pages for the website. Hmm. Pricing. And if you remembered what we discussed for auto layout, if you want to make sure that the spacing in between um, items is even, you can select all of these and then group it and then just auto layout. And you can just dictate what the space in between should be. And to make sure that it's aligned, just click on, oh, wait, just here, there. Okay. And then have the button here. And there, we have that. But if, I'm gonna rename it to mentor. But if this is something that you need to adjust because this is just for the desktop size, but you needed to adjust for an iPad size, for example. Wait, there's a constraint already, but usually it shouldn't adjust here. Depending on, as you can see, this one doesn't adjust down like this button. So this is when you need to apply constraints if you want it to adjust by itself. So instead of, since this constraint, it's for the left and the top, so it will adjust in relation to, if you can see there are blue dotted lines, so that's how it adjusts. It's in relation to the left and the top part of the frame. But we can change it so that it will remain in the center. There, that's how constraints work. Okay. And there, scale. So when you plug it into a desktop, you can easily and you can easily scale it down for an iPad, for example, depending on what you want. So yeah, this is something that you can just play around with. Yeah. So those are the constraints. And then for components and instances naman, so components are elements that you can keep reusing in your design. So for example, like buttons or card elements, these are elements that you see repeating throughout websites and apps. So this is something that makes it easier since you don't have to, just copy paste it. It's something that you can just access here. You can just drag and drop. So yun, how exactly do you make a component? So you can make a button here. So same thing that we did. Hmm, to layout. Hmm, oh, there. And what you can do so that it becomes a reusable element or a component is once you have it selected, you can go here, create a component, and as you can see, the icon here changes. So the component is the one that looks like this, the icon. And as you can see, when you copy and paste that component, the icon changes. So this is the icon for an instance. And what's great about components is You don't have to manually edit every single element like a button if you want to change it. So if you edit the component, maybe I want to change the color to this, it automatically translates to the instances. So that's what's great about it. And with the instances naman, you can override things like color. So you can change it to purple, but it doesn't affect the component, which is great. But if you want to apply that color to the main component and so it will apply to all the other instances as well, you can go here to the instance options and push your override to the main component. So that's also something that's very helpful for design. Um, and then you can also detach the instance if you don't want it to be connected to the component again. Okay. And what you can do in with components to make it easier for you to work on your designs is you can play around with variants. So this is how it looks like. As you can see, there are different types of buttons. There's a default one, a ghost button, and a plain button. So how you do that is once you have your component here, you can add a variant by going here and it will create a new button for you. So maybe we want to name this a ghost button. And then from there, we just change the element. So we remove the fill, add a stroke, and then change the font color. And there you have a ghost button. And then you can also add a new variant by clicking this. This one will be a plain button. So same thing, remove the fill, change the font color, and you can also change the paddings around the button. So it looks like that. And you can also change the size of this if you want, since you can make it like that. So you can move it around. You can organize it however you want. And from there, you can access it here in your assets, drag and drop. And then if you want, for example, a different type of button, you can just go here and then change it into the property that you want and it does that for you. So this is something that will be very helpful, especially when you start working with design systems. So there, those are the components and instances. I think we've covered all that we have to for the properties panel for the design tab. So um, let's start applying it by creating our own design system. So yun, we'll be covering styles now here. So for example, before you start your design, right, you'll have your brand colors, you'll be deciding on what typography you want because these are the building blocks of your design. So something in to make designing easier for you and so those who your clients or your teammates will be accessing your Figma file to so that you can set it up so that it will be easier for everyone to know how to work with the design. So how we can add color styles is you can just select a shape with that color and then go here to the color styles and then you can create the style. So there. Um, and how we can label it then is since these are under brand colors, we'll put brand and then we'll have a slash and then the name is that shade of blue, create style, and there you can see that it created a category for brand colors and that the color appears here. So you can do it for this one as well. And it appears. And then do it for this too. And there you have all your three brand colors. So for example, and you can also change it very easily. And when you are not selecting anything, you can see that this new panel has appeared, and this is where you can access all your colors. So if you can see here, this edit style button also appears, and this is where you can kind of edit your style. So you can change the name, you can add a description, and then you can also change the color from here. So you can change it like that, and everything that has that color style selected, it will automatically change it to that, which is great. There. So that's how the color styles work. And then for the text styles naman, it works in a similar way. So just select the text with the styles that you want applied and go here, create style. And usually for typography, it will be divided into desktop, tablet, and mobile. So for this, we'll make it desktop and then heading one. So there, it created that style, and you can also change it from there. So we'll be doing the same for all of these. Two, heading three, all the way until the body text. And then you also have the button text. So there. When you click out again, you'll see that all of the text styles that you created are here. And from there, you can also change it. You can apply styles like this. So you can select it. You can select a text object, click on that, and you can apply any type of heading or body text style that you want. So there. That's how you create the color and text styles, and this is how you start creating your design system in Figma. So once you have the color styles and your typography styles set, this is when you start creating the assets, right? So that will be the nav bar, buttons, input field, card. So there, assets, you can also call it components because this is what you'll be pulling out from there and um, repeating it throughout your design. So we can get the nav bar that we made earlier here. Make sure for desktop size, and then we'll create a component outfit and we'll rename it navbar. And as you can see, it's part of the assets tab. Same thing with the buttons. Um, we'll, we'll grab this. And we can turn it into a component just like earlier. So this will be the button. We'll not add variants for now. Um, and then we can make a card. So we'll make a frame for the card. That I'll put a stroke so I can see it. And we'll pull the content that we used earlier for auto layout. And we'll just copy paste it there. And since it's a frame, it kind of clips the content for you so you can see. And then we can resize it to fit. Mm, auto layout. And from there, you can just add or dictate the padding. So there, it makes it very easy just using auto layout. And then change the corners. We'll change the stroke color to something lighter. And then once we have that card, we can create a component out of it, rename it, and same, it will appear here as well. So once we have these main assets, we can plug it into a frame that's desktop size. So this is how you start creating a mockup. Once you have your assets, once you have all your textiles, this is when you can start plugging it into a frame. So you can drag the nav bar there. Um, that. And then we can add a layout grid just so our designs will be more precise. Or and then we can pull up our card components. So just line it up like that. Or you can also just select everything and then change the alignment. And then since you don't want it to have the same content, you can just change it here and it won't affect the other components. You can also change this part. And then there. Um, you'll have something that looks like a mock-up. You can also add title. And then you can apply a text style to it and change the color. There. So now that you have this, we can start talking about prototyping since um, we don't just want, or for UX design at least, it's very important rin to show how pages will flow into each other, how users will use your platform. So this is, we can discuss the prototype tab. Okay, so when you go to the prototype tab, first you'll see the prototype settings. So you can click on it, you can choose a device depending on what screen you're designing for. So you can choose a phone, and when you click on percent,
Wait, sorry. Sorry to interrupt, pero may static ulit.
wait, hello,
May static ulit.
um, hello,
Meron ulit, sorry.
bad is it?
Is it okay if you try to test your audio muna?
Okay, sige.
Thank you.
Hello?
Hello, I think. Ay, wait lang naman. And nag-echo.
Hello?
Hello?
Is this better?
I think a bit, yeah.
Okay, sige. Sorry.
Yeah, okay. Okay lang na. Thank you.
Okay. So yeah, back to prototyping. Yun, you can pick out the device that you want, but for now we'll just stick to none since we're on a desktop anyway. And then you can also change the background, so the background of how the background color depending on what you want. And then you can also dictate the starting frame. So those are the prototype settings. And then interactions naman, this is, it appears when, for example, we want to add some functionality to this buy now button. So as you can see, this appears and that's how you can add an interaction. So on this is where you can see the details. So you can specify how the interaction will happen. So will it happen when you click on it, when the user drags on it, while you hover on it? So those are things that you can dictate. So for now, we'll select on click, and then you also pick again what will happen when it goes there. So you can navigate to a different page. You can also do it by clicking on this and dragging it somewhere. So for example, you want it to go to a different page like this. We'll just click and drag on it. Oh, wait. Okay. Oh no. Wait lang. Oh, or for example, there. And then we can test it out. For example, you click on this card, it will go to a page. Okay, so that's how it works. And then you can also add an animation to the interaction. So you can, so that, if you wanted to go in instantly, if you wanted to dissolve, for example, like that, you have options that you can play around with, like that. And then there's also this option for smart animating. So how that works, let me show you. Um, wait, oh no, there. Okay. For example, we have these two circles. We want that while hovering on the circle, so on hover, we'll navigate to this frame, and we'll see how that works. Oh, oh no. Okay. So, oh wait there. Okay, so when you hover on, when you hover on it, it kind of animates it for you, like that. And then you can also refine what how your animation will behave. So these are options that you can play around with. You can dictate how long it will transition to that. So those are some things that you can do with prototyping. And then for overlays naman, okay, I'll take out this, I'll copy this overlay, I'll put it here. As you can see, it's not as big as the desktop size. So what you can do is can mm, I'll select this button and then I'll make it go to that. So on click, I'll navigate, I'll open this overlay. And as you can see, this overlay option appears. So you can dictate where this frame will appear. Do you want it centered? Do you want it um, top right or bottom left? Or you can also do it manually if you want. And then you can also select options like close when clicking outside. And you can also add a background to your overlay. And same thing, you can also dictate what kind of animation you want. So when we go back, can click on that and it opens an overlay like that. And when you click out, it will close. So that's how you can create overlays with Figma. So there, since I discussed most of the functionalities in Figma, I think I can talk about random Figma tips that will help make your workflow better. So one one Figma tip is resizing your design. So for example, this overlay that I have, I want it to be bigger. I can just press K or the scale functionality from earlier and wait, and it will help you adjust your design easily like that. If you just try to do it in this way, it doesn't really work. So that's an easier way of scaling your designs in Figma. And then for spacing naman, especially since in design, we want our designs to be pixel perfect and to follow the 8-point grid. A shortcut that I like using is Alt Option. So if you want to check the spacing between this title and this body text, you can click Alt Option and it shows you how much space is between that. Or you can also check between this and the frame, and you can also have it there, move it around so you can see um, how much space is there while you're moving it. And then for resizing frames naman, we can go here to this about page. If you wanted to add some more content beneath the testimonials, you have to increase the size, but as you can see, some elements kind of move around and we don't want that. So what you want to do is press Control or Command and then drag the canvas so that no elements and actually even the constraints are kind of overridden with this. So that's also very helpful. And then for nudging, this is something that if we want objects to move around faster, instead of using the 1 pixel nudge, we can hold down Shift and then access the bigger nudge. And this is also something that you can change here as a nudge amount. So even the small nudge, you can change it to a different value and then the bigger nudge into something else. Usually the default of the big nudge is 10, but we usually change it to 8 since it's best practices to follow the 8-point grid. Okay. And then for the image shortcut naman, um, instead of having to, go to fill image and then choosing the image bar, what you can do instead is going to an image that's already existing. Let's change that. You can click on the bottom left and then copy it using Controller Command C. And then you can easily just paste it here by doing the same thing. So you click here again, and then you paste it. And as you can see, it adds a new fill layer. So yeah, that's just an easy image shortcut that you can apply. And then for moving layers, um, since as you can see, it depends which layer is on top. It's what shows up first. You can move it around by um, clicking on Command or Control bracket. So as you can see, it's just moving around like that. So this shortcut is also very helpful to know because you don't have to mouse over here and then keep dragging it around like that. And then another thing is tidying up elements. So I think this is called the smart selection tool as well. So if you have, for example, you're importing multiple icons here, if you wanted it to have a certain spacing in between, as you can see, there's this pink UI that comes up, so you can drag it and it will create some space for all the elements, and you can also change it here. So that's also something that could be helpful. And then auto width, this is what we discussed with the text kanina. So you can change it here, but if you want, for example, your text is like that, you can also do it easily by just double clicking. Oh no, wait, I'll make a new one. You can just double click it and it will automatically um, make it auto width for you instead of a fixed size. And then for easy object selection, this will be very helpful for example, when you have a lot of elements like here, if you want to go to the title, for example, you have to keep double clicking until you get there. So what you can do instead is you can click on Command or Control and then just select it, and there it's selected easily. So yeah, those are some Figma tips. So yeah, that wraps up the workshop.
Alright, thank you so much. So, can I just say lang din, if nag-attend ako ng workshop like this a few months ago, I feel like I wouldn't have struggled so much in my design classes. So, thank you so much. I personally learned a lot today, and I'm sure many of the others in the Zoom call feel the same way. So maybe we can go ahead sa question and answer portion since may onting time pa tayo. Is that okay?
Oh yeah.
Let's see. Actually, meron na nag-ask sa akin right now. Ano, actually, hindi ko na sabihin pangalan. Pero tanong ko, paano wait, sorry, let me scroll up. Tanong ko kung paano import ng fonts.
No fonts. Okay. For the fonts pala, if it's something that it's already on Google, what you can do is go to preferences and show Google fonts. So that's what I usually do. But for mga custom fonts that's not included, I usually just go to my, it's the one in the system, so you kind of just upload it to your typography book, and then it will already appear here. So for example, this one, it was a custom font, it's not a Google font, it automatically just syncs up here. So yeah, that's how you work with the fonts.
Mhm. And to add to that then, I think if you download yung desktop app ng Figma, lahat
Mm,
ng local fonts
yeah.
mo mapupunta na rin sa Figma.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, may other questions pa ba? Ayun. So, could you give us some Figma plugins that you commonly use in your projects? Thank you.
Okay. So some that I like using, it's mostly the photos since it makes it easier because you don't have to go to Unsplash or Pexels, for example. and having to download it there. So here, so this is something that I like using, especially for when you have personas or users. So, for example, if you want a portrait, you can just click on it and it will pick out a random, that's not a portrait, it will pick out a random photo for you, or you can also search it and then, it will automatically plug in the photos for you. So it makes it very easy. And then some other plugins, I like using this one because yeah, this is usually though for when I work with visual design and I want to explore some 3D elements. And then I also have in my other account, I have one for icons because that's also something like the photos. It's much easier to access it from Figma rather than having to look for it online. So photos, icons, sometimes illustrations if there are, or there's also one for emojis. Yeah.
Mhm. And then may isa pang question. Tanong ko din, paano gawing horizontal yung cellphone kapag piniplay sa prototype?
Okay. Wait. I'll make a frame. Okay, for example, go to prototype and then you can adjust it here so it can either be portrait or landscape. So there. That's how you work with it.
Alright, sige. I hope that answered your question. May isa pang question. So, how do you reuse components from one Figma project to other projects?
Okay. If it's, I think that's usually that happens when you're inside a team. Oh my, this account doesn't. It's not part of a team right now, but it's something that you have to. Parang, let me go to my other one. For example, mm, because there's something called a team library, and that's where you can compile all the components that you need there. Okay, here, there. For example, well, this isn't really complete, but you can turn libraries on and off, and then they kind of just appear there. But yeah, I really can't demo it since I don't have a team with my account.
Mhm.
But they should also appear here.
And then we have another question then. So, someone's asking if how do you choose colors though?
Oh, colors. Sometimes I just do it intuitively, but if I don't, what I like doing also is going to Pinterest and looking for some photos or anything like graphic design work with colors that I might like, and then I just use the eyedropper tool from there.
Same, same. All right. So last question for me na lang din. You said earlier na favorite prototyping tool mo is Figma, but have you tried other prototyping tools besides
Yeah,
Figma?
I've
And
also
how were
used
they?
okay, I've also used Sketch for one of my internships and then InVision for one of my class projects. But well, at that time, because Sketch didn't have the collaboration aspect that Figma did, and for Sketching, you need to have a license to access it. So that's also why I gravitated towards Figma because it was free and you can collaborate in real time with other designers or anybody else who's working on your team. And um, it's also something that you can access on your browser. So It's very easy to just send to anyone for feedback.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
True. Google Docs nga siya ng
Yeah.
design tool. Alright, sige. So, I think that's it. There's no more questions. So, thank you guys for attending. And, syempre, thank you rin kay Miss Martin for being our speaker today. I think may isang question pa.
Oh.
I, hi, misclick lang ata yun. Alright, sige. Thank you guys. You guys can leave na. I'll stop recording na. Thank you.